Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use exits to the left, right, or front of the council chamber, or the east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, proceed down Ninth Street and into the assembly area located in the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. Persons wishing to speak during the public comment period or public hearings are generally allowed 3 minutes to speak. Persons appearing before the committee are not allowed to campaign for public office, promote private business ventures, use language of a personal nature which assaults or demeans any person, including comments directed at public officials or staff members that are not related to their official duties, or address the question to staff members directly. All questions to be directed to the committee chair. Failure to adhere to the guidelines may result in speakers forfeiting any remaining time and further disciplinary action as necessary, which could include bar from attendance at future meetings of the committee for a period of 6 months. Madam Chair, this concludes the announcements.
Madam Clerk, will we move to the public comment period?
Is there anyone here present today that would like to speak about items not on today's agenda?
Good afternoon. My name is Omari El Khadafi. I'm a senior community organizer at Legal Aid Justice Center and a public housing subject matter expert. I'm a Richmond native. I graduated from Armstrong High School, and I believe in public housing. Today, I'm here to support the Public Housing Authority. I'm here to support our city's affordable housing framework. I'm here to support the subsidiary of the Housing Authority, which is Richmond Development Corporation. We're all here to support a redevelopment of public housing that is resident-led and community-supported. Our city established that as a goal a long time ago. My mentor, Lily A. Estes, was a public housing organizer. She lived in Gilpin Court, and she successfully fought to have 3 RHA residents on the RHA Board of Commissioners. And when the CEO of RHA appeared before you all at this committee's last month, he said he agreed that residents should have a voice on the board for the Richmond Development Corporation. I think, though, based on some, statements and on their website, he thinks that there should only be one member of one RHA resident on that board. I think there's a lot of opportunity that the nonprofit could bring. Our residents and the city's leadership need input on those opportunities. You need input on what to do with the $16 million in cash and assets they hold. What's going to happen with the $5 million when they sell the building on 400 East Grace Street? How are these profits being used to benefit residents? We talk about the inhumane conditions. I was in Gilpin Court yesterday, and the fire department opened up a water hose for people outside the Calhoun Center because it was hot, and it's a swimming pool right in there that's been sitting there dysfunctional for like 15, 20 years or something like that. But, there's money sitting around and residents don't have any input. None of your appointed officials have any input on how those profits can be used to benefit residents. We keep hearing things recently about, how things will happen and this and that. But nothing's in writing. I think we should have something in writing to say exactly what, when those profits go back to residents. There's been talk about the Tenant Bill of Rights. I was a part of the effort to bring the Tenant Bill of Rights to Richmond when Legal Aid Justice Center first did it in Charlottesville with the public housing residents there. So I brought that to Richmond, but the intention was for it to be passed by the board and also passed by city council so that it's enshrined into the direction that the city wants to go in. So I just thank you guys for your leadership, actually. I think that we are witnessing good leadership locally right now as it relates to this issue. And thanks again for, escalating the issue when the community brought it to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddafi.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Arthur Burton. I'm a resident of the 2nd District. So I would also like to ditto Mr. Gaddafi's last comments in thanking you guys for the leadership that we are seeing and putting your voice and your shoulders to this issue, because we are already starting to see some results on the ground with organizations starting to come in and give the community some of the services that has long needed to have. And while it's just a start, it's a great start, and we know that it is largely due to some of the efforts you guys are making along with us to build a new community that we all can be proud of, that is a monument to who we see ourselves as being as one humanity. And speaking of which, I do want to speak to this idea that the larger community should not have a voice in what goes on in Gilpin Court. When the fact of the matter is, when the city did the community engagement plan for Gilpin Court, it was given to the health department because the larger community did not see RRHA as a trusted agent. And we extended the boundaries for that community engagement to come all the way over to Jackson Ward. And we included the residents and the businesses, and we promoted the idea that we were going to build bridges across 95 and reunite this community to be one community. And now that the community is engaged, we are hearing from the housing authority that we have no voice or should have no voice in the matter. And that's just wrong-headed. This is about the future of this city. This is about how downtown looks, how we build homes, and what we see our future to be. And everybody should have a voice in that. And it's going to take all of us. Okay? And then my last comment is, we're not fighting against anybody. We are advocating for all of us to do this together and do this in a way that all of us have some skin in the game. Okay? We don't need to do press conferences with pictures of children holding signs calling people liars, because we're not doing that. That's not what we are about. We are trying to build a new community that reflects the way we want to live in the future together.
30 seconds.
And so I urge you guys to let's not go down that road, because that's not a road we want to go down. We are hot, we are tired, and we are just coming out of COVID. We are recovering. We ain't got time to do no fighting. We just need some help, and we thank y'all for what y'all have done for us so far. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Burton.
Is there anyone else here present that would like to speak about items not on today's agenda? Please state your name for the record. Please speak into the mic.
My name is Sylvia Davis. Good afternoon. And I am a resident of Gilpin Court. I came to the meeting on June 9th when I was told if I attend and hold up a sign that I would get a gift card. Then once I got in here, what I was told is not what I heard. Yes, Gilpin needs to be remodeled, but under the agreement and what I was hearing, the proposal, not agreement, the proposal that I was hearing, I don't think it should be done that way. I have children. I have a 19, well, she just turned 21. I have a 21-year-old daughter on a ventilator. I have pictures of my home where maintenance has not been doing what I've heard in this meeting. Y'all are entitled to look at these pictures at any given time of how my apartment currently look. There was a power cord hanging and it clotheslined. My grandson almost took his head off. When I spoke with Mr. Nesman about it, he said DAM, that's effed up. And I asked him who was going to pay for it, because somebody should be held responsible for that. Mr. Nesman eased away from me, which I was here with him. And like I stated, pictures of my apartment. Yes, Gilpin do need to be remodeled. But at the same time, the board all needs to be together. It does not need to be one person sitting on that finance. If one person is sitting on that finance committee, all of us is in trouble. And I have children. I have grandchildren that I'm raising. Their mother is dead. So with that being said, I felt like listening to what I was listening to and being offered a gift card to come and then listening to what I was listening to, I don't feel like that proposal should be agreed upon unless there are more members from the RRHA committee on that finance board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Is there anyone else here present that would like to speak about items not on today's agenda? Seeing none, the public comment period is now closed.
1 second, we're having a problem with the Teams link. Oh, someone wants to speak, Madam Clerk. Yeah. Okay, Madam Clerk, we can proceed. Approval of the minute.
The minutes to be approved are from the June 17th, 2025 Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee meeting. If there are no amendments or corrections, then those meeting minutes stand approved as presented. Those minutes have been approved.
We're currently having a Teams issue. We're working on it now. Thanks for letting us know. Madam Clerk, let's move to the board packet. The presentation, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones, Vice Chair Robertson, Councilor Breton, Pamela Nichols, Council Management Analyst. I will be brief before you this afternoon. The board packet before you captures current and projected vacancies through November of this year. And as you will notice, this report is really short. Thank you all so much for the hard work and also getting the word out. These are all of the vacancies for the committees that report to this standing committee. And you will see like up for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Supervisory Board, just for informational purposes, the mayor made an appointment of a person with professional experience with or knowledge of public housing, and he made that appointment on February the 12th. And then moving down to the Board of Fire Appeals, there are 3 vacancies, and we received 1 reappointment application from William Andrews. And we also did receive support from the fire department for his reappointment. And then for the Community Transportation Advisory Committee, so then there is 1 vacancy. I do apologize, for Commission of Architectural Review for 1 citizen at large, but there we did not receive any applications. And then for the Community Transportation Advisory Committee to the MPO, there's 1 vacancy for an individual who resides or have a principal place of employment in the city. And we received an application from James Hutzler, 3rd District resident.
I move to accept James Hutzler's application, and as well as Erica Sims and William Andrews.
Do we have a second? The committee is voting on the motion to forward the board recommendations as stated to council with the recommendation to approve. Mr. Breton?
Aye.
Vice Chair Robertson?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to the papers, starting with paper number 2.
Item 2, ordinance 2025-165, to execute a lease agreement between the city and New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for the purpose of allowing New Singular Wireless to continue to maintain and operate a telecommunications facility at 3518 North Hopkins Road. That paper is before the committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Shemaya Wilson. I'm with the Department of Emergency Communications, Preparedness and Response. This paper authorizes the CAO to execute a lease agreement between the city and New Singular Wireless PCS. The lease will allow New Singular Wireless to continue to operate their equipment at 3518 North Hopkins. This lease is for a term of 5 years, with the initial rent being $47,000, increasing by 103% annually. The lease also allows for 5 additional term extensions. I can answer any questions you may have.
We're gonna hold a public hearing first. Do you have any questions?
Is there anyone here present that would like to speak in support of item 2? Is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition of item 2? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Bring it back to the committee.
I have a question. I would like to know what method we use to determine the lease amount. Like, is this a bidding process? Is it a negotiation? Is it based on some criteria? Like, how do we determine that lease amount? Where did that come from?
Well, it goes off of what the market rate is going for in that area, and it's negotiated by the city council as well as the cellular companies council. But going forward, it will be at a rate of 103% annually.
So 103% is in 3% more each year, or not? Okay.
So we would start off at 47,000 starting this year and increase by 103% each year thereafter. So next year it would be an increase by $1,410.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
I second.
The committee is voting on the motion to forward item 2, ordinance 2025-165 to council with the recommendation to approve. Mr. Burton?
Aye.
Vice Chair Robertson? Chair Jones?
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Madam Clerk, paper number 3.
Item 3, Resolution 2025-R030, to support an application to the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development for the purpose of participating in the Virginia Main Street Program as an exploring Main Street community. That paper is before the committee.
Is there anyone here from the administration to speak to the paper?
Matt Welch, Acting Director of Economic Development. This is a resolution that allows the city to move forward with applying to DHCD for the Main Street program. The first step in that program is the Exploring Main Street for a $375 fee that we would pay per year. That gives us technical assistance, help with community engagement to start working on the program to move to step 2 in about 3 to 5 year process to get all the way through the process and designated Main Street. The current target is the Broad Street corridor. The exact boundaries to be determined. We're looking from 18th to Belvedere. The goal is to get this implemented and have a successful program so we can expand to other corridors within the city, because this is the first time we've taken this step.
Madam Clerk, let's hold a public comment on the paper.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of item 3? Is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition of item 3? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Bring it back to the committee.
I move that we support the paper.
Second.
The committee is voting on the motion to forward item 3, resolution 2025-R030 to council with the recommendation to approve. Mr. Burton?
Aye.
Vice Chair Robertson?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, paper number 4.
Item 4, resolution 2025-R032 to support an application to VDOT's alternative program for the purpose of funding the installation of pedestrian safety improvements along Patterson Avenue from Maple Avenue to Libby Avenue, and to commit to the required agreements of VDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program. That paper is for the committee.
Is there anyone from the administration here to speak on this paper?
Good afternoon, Chair Jones and members of the Land Use Committee. I'm M. Khera, City Engineer, Department of Public Works. This resolution is requesting City Council support for Transportation Alternative Program grant application for Patterson Avenue pedestrian improvement between Libby Avenue and Maple Avenue. The requested improvements will be ADA curb ramps, reconstruction of sidewalk, bike racks, and narrowing down some of the entrances to the shopping center for reducing pedestrian and vehicle conflicts. Project will also provide some additional pedestrian amenities such as site furniture, landscaping, and greenery along this corridor only at the south curb of Patterson Avenue. This project is a part of city's Vision Zero action plan to improve pedestrian safety on high injury street network, where Patterson Avenue is one. The total cost for the project is about $1.44 million. Federal funds being requested of $1 million. That's 80% of the cost. 20% match is required to provide is $250,000 that City Council will be committing to if the project gets funded. We also proposed some additional CBTA local funds for $187,000 to make the application more competitive. As you know that Transportation Alternative Program, City was approved for 5 applications to submit for this FY 27-28 grant cycle. 4 applications were approved last month in June. Land Use Committee ends by City Council, and this is the 5th application, so that completes our maximum number of applications that can be submitted to. And I will be happy to answer any question.
Madam Clerk, let's hold a public comment on the paper.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of item 4? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition of item 4? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Bring it back to the committee.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The committee is voting on the motion to forward item 4, resolution 2025 R032 to council with the recommendation to approve. Mr. Burton,
Aye.
Vice Chair Robinson, Chair Jones.
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Madam Clerk, let's go to paper number 1 with the presentation.
Item 1, ordinance 2025-161 to amend city code for the purpose of establishing a residential rental inspection program.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones, Kevin J. Vonk, Director for Planning and Development Review. I also have with me Michelle Coward. She is our Deputy Director for Property Maintenance and Code Enforcement. And here I'm today to talk about the establishment of a residential rental inspection program. Shortened to RRIP. What is it? It is something that promotes safe, decent, and sanitary housing in residential rental dwelling units in a manner consistent with law and authority set forth in these sections of Code of Virginia. This is a section of Code of Virginia that's very prescriptive in terms of what a municipality can or cannot do in establishing this type of program. In short, what it does is it allows us to add residential rental dwelling units to this program in order to conduct proactive inspections of residential rental dwelling units within it. So it allows us to go forward and do proactive inspections. More particularly, it allows for periodic inspections of residential rental dwelling units. Also upon property transfer, looking for building code violations. For properties with 10 or more units, it allows inspection of 10% of those units. And if there's a violation found in one of those units, it allows all of the units in that particular complex to be inspected. Any building, right, new construction, they get their new CO, or once we've done an inspection and found it to be compliant, they are exempt from periodic and transfer inspections for 48 months. With that, this never negates the ability of the commissioner of buildings or his or her designee to respond to tenant or citizen complaints. So if we go in on Monday and do a proactive inspection, don't find anything, something happens during the week and they want to call us on Thursday to report a complaint, we can go back in and re-inspect to respond to that complaint. Building code violations, run the gamut from things of deferred and defective maintenance to unsafe conditions. These are found in Chapter 5 of City Code. We follow the Uniform Building Code. These are not environmental violations. This is not tall grass, weeds, accumulation. These are things related to the building and the occupancy and habitability of the building itself. And so we go through a proactive inspection looking for these types of things that are, again, defective maintenance or unsafe conditions. Again, as for the types of inspections, there's an initial inspection, which really sometimes can also be looking at that dwelling unit and understanding, is it used for residential rental purposes? Right, so just that structure may have multiple units in it, and this program only allows us to inspect those that are used for residential purposes. For periodic ones, no more than one time each calendar year. And again, with the spacing, and if something is approved, that 4-year period. Within a property transfer, if a property is in that program, they have to notify us within 30 days that that property has been transferred, which allows for another inspection. And then follow-up inspections are ones that are needed to achieve compliance. So if we go in and there's a violation, we're allowed to follow up until that unit is compliant with our building code. So question comes up, what residential rental units should we inspect? And asking, what are the criteria that are established out there? So Code of Virginia tells us we have to, if we're going to include units in there, they have to meet the following criteria. 1, we need to protect health, safety, and welfare of those occupants. 2, those units are either blighted or in the process of deteriorating or in need of inspection as determined by the building department or building commissioner to prevent deterioration, taking into account, the number of units, the age, condition of such units, and it's necessary to maintain safe, decent, sanitary living conditions. So if we're going to add units into the program, and this is done by City Council, this is not an administrative thing. So City Council has to say, yep, we want these units into the program. They have to demonstrate that the reason they're going into the program is because it fits all of these criteria. So what residential units should we inspect? There's approaches that were taken by some of our neighbors in the Commonwealth. So Fairfax City, Alexandria City have several inspection districts with hundreds, if not thousands of units throughout each of their respective municipalities. That is an approach that they have taken, and they've most recently updated it. Fairfax added some as recently as 22. Alexandria City has been doing theirs for a while. This is an approach that's a possible approach, but not one that we as administration would recommend the city take. This is looking at Henrico. So their first inspection district was done back in 2021, and they put Glenwood Farms, an apartment complex, or I guess it was a single family rental complex into this inspection district. And then they added earlier this year, St. Luke Apartments. And so this approach really looked at, all right, where are we facing the greatest challenges in terms of health and safety of our residents? These are complexes where tenants had approached the county and asked for them to do something to be more proactive. And so this approach where you're taking in, one complex at a time is something that we would recommend if this paper moves forward in the future to look at this type of approach for adding units into the rental inspection program. So with that, a question comes back to, these words like blight, deterioration, how do we define it? The ordinance includes some recommendations is that council could look at as part of their determination how many building or health code violations the property had in the previous 48 months. number of incidents requiring public safety emergency service response in the previous 48 months, or the number of tenants of those units who have petitioned us to address conditions based on conditions that are causing detriment to their health, safety, and well-being. Again, these are not mandatory, but we felt it was important to include these in the ordinance as recommendations in terms of potential things that this body could consider when adding units into the program. Also, things I think important to consider, and we've been talking a lot about this as we've crafted the ordinance. How many residential dwelling units do we have the capacity to inspect at once? I would say, we could probably add a few dozen, maybe a few hundred at the lower end, and be able to handle it with the staff we have right now. If we start adding hundreds of units, we're going to need additional staff to be able to do those proactive inspections, especially if we find ones right with violations that are continuing to have these follow-up inspections. So, before we go in the process of adding units to this program, we need to consider, all right, how much capacity do we have to inspect? Also, as part of that, if units are not compliant, how is the property owner going to help tenants with temporary housing? Landlord is responsible for housing their tenant. If that tenant is paying rent, the landlord is responsible for providing that tenant some type of housing unit. And if it can't be the one that they're in currently, they need to provide them an alternative substitute. We have worked with some property owners where we've had issues to, again, in the best case, having that landlord being able to house them in another unit on the property or in the complex that is compliant, that is up to code. And so working through to make sure, if we add a number of units into the program, how are we going to look at cases that we may find situations that require the unit to be placarded as unsafe? How are we going to, work, or should say, how is the landlord going to provide that tenant temporary housing? And then what happens for property owners who did not provide temporary housing in terms of the capacity of the city? I will say is limited for us ourselves to provide those options. So thinking about the resources that we can connect tenants with so that they are able to find housing if the property owner is not able to provide it. And then also, how does the inclusion of these residential rental units impact the perception of the neighborhood? I think, when you look at the cases in Alexandria and Fairfax in those cities, by casting a wide net across large swaths of their community, potentially that could have negative impacts on how people feel about the community, on how people choose to invest or not invest in the community. And so again, I think going back to when we talk about adding units into the program, being very particular and precise about those units that we add and focusing on, I will say, only what we can handle and only really ones, again, leaning towards the criteria where tenants have come to us and say, hey, please help us get us into this program because we need the help. Instead of, a top-down approach being a bottom-up way to it. So our recommendation from staff is to have City Council adopt this ordinance presented in front of you, and then amend the ordinance in the future as needed to add rental units into the program in accordance with the guiding criteria. So just the reason it's a two-part here is that the ordinance today establishes the program. There are no units that will be inspected if this ordinance is adopted. You will need a separate ordinance, and again, that comes through council to actually add units into the program, which could be done at a future date. And I think, again, warrants more discussion in terms of what, where, capacity, and some of the things that we discussed today. But as of today, staff recommends moving forward with the ordinance in front of you. I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Vonk. We'll do a public hearing on this paper first, and then we'll have any questions.
Great.
Thanks.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak in opposition of item 1? In opposition?
Good afternoon. My name is Latoya Washington. I am a property owner here in the city, and I am here to speak in opposition to the implementation of rental inspection districts as currently drafted. I fully support safe, quality, housing for all residents. However, as it's written, this ordinance raises serious concerns, particularly for small independent landlords like me who operate on very tight budgets. Rental inspection programs often disproportionately target low-income neighborhoods and communities of color under the guise of safety. In practice, they can lead to displacement, increased rents, and added costs that many mom and pop landlords simply just cannot absorb. The ordinance gives City Council broad authority to create inspection districts based on vague criteria, and this could stigmatize entire neighborhoods, drive down property values, and discourage much needed investments in many areas, directly affecting my livelihood and the stability of the community that I serve. Without a clear funding plan or support for compliance, I'm worried that I could be forced to make costly repairs without any financial assistance. And if I can't afford to meet those requirements, I could lose my property or see it labeled as uninhabitable, displace the very tenants that I work very hard to house. If the true goal is for safer housing, enforcement should be narrowly focused on bad actors who are repeatedly ignoring safety standards and not responsible owners like myself who are trying to do the right thing with limited resources. I thank you for your time and I hope that you all will consider.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition?
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of council. My name is Elizabeth Greenfield. I represent the Home Building Association of Richmond. And we have a number of multifamily developers that also manage their multifamily properties. Like the previous speaker, we don't have concerns about inspecting problem properties. Our issue is the way the paper is written currently with establishing districts and just the unintended consequence of potentially stigmatizing those neighborhoods and also drawing in landlords who are properly maintaining their property. We would encourage you to take a more targeted approach, similar to Mr. Vong's presentation, like Henrico County, where you identify the units that are causing the most problem and dissatisfaction for their tenants and use your resources there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
If there is anyone else that would like to speak in opposition, could you please form a line at the podium if you are able?
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Messerian. I represent the Virginia Apartment Management Association. Like the speakers before me, we would like to support a program that supports safe and quality housing for all Richmond residents. However, we believe enforcement efforts should be more acutely focused on bad actors that consistently fail to meet that standard. To that end, we have proposed language that we believe advances the city's goals without the unintended consequence of an overly broad or undefined ordinance, such as an exemption for those that have a CAM certification or those that hold a real estate broker's license. We have several members of the Virginia Apartment Management Association here today that provide housing in Richmond that can attest to the effects on their business with an overly broad program. They're running behind me, so I'm going to give that to them.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Renee Pulliam with Tallheimer and the Virginia Apartment Management Association. Like the speakers before me, we do believe in providing safe, quality housing. My comments are specific to Mr. Vonk's presentation in establishing when a property would be considered blighted or deteriorated. One of those items was calls for service to local police, fire, or other service providers. I don't understand how those would tie directly to building code violations. We certainly should want our citizens in the city to reach out for service for the police or fire or otherwise, but to tie that back to a potential building code violation, there could be multiple calls for service to the fire department if there are dust particles in your fire system that would set off the alarms, for example. So having calls for service as a trigger for classifying a property as blighted or deteriorated does not meet, from my perspective, or the code section that was referenced earlier, a building code violation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of council, Laura Lafayette with the Richmond Association of Realtors. Most of the comments that I would make, you've already heard. I think we can agree on the intent of this ordinance and the desire for people to have safe, stable, healthy homes. And we've also heard from members of council in one-on-one conversations that the intent is really about drawing very, very specific districts on very problematic properties. The example of Henrico, they took years and years to get to this point where they drew those boundaries. And so what I would say is, if the language of the ordinance matched the intent, I think you would see less opposition. But as the ordinance is drawn today, there are a lot of properties that could get caught up inadvertently in some of these zones. And it would be really unfair for the property owners who are doing the right thing to see their properties perhaps stigmatized by the label of blight and then devalued. And we certainly wouldn't want to see displacement and then folks not able to secure housing that they can afford. So I would just ask that we take a pause and see if we can collectively tighten up the ordinance to meet the intent that you all have expressed to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joanna Reynolds. I was a property manager in the city of Richmond for. Could you please speak more to the mic? My name is Joanna Reynolds. I was a property manager in the city of Richmond for 3 years. This is Debbie. We represent Drucker and Falk and VAMA as well. While I personally am not necessarily opposed to the idea behind the ordinance, I do have concerns with the way that it's written. People have talked about making districts and the issues that would cause as far as stigma to the properties. It also calls into question some potential fair housing issues. My primary concern, however, is the ability of the city to enforce any sorry, this is my first time doing this. My concern is the way the building code is written right now does not actually hold many property owners accountable. Not all property owners are small-time actors, some are larger-time actors, and it is very difficult oftentimes to hold those owners directly accountable. The way the code is written right now, it specifically says that any person in connection with maintenance at the property can be held responsible, particularly in issues of large code violations. Like I personally am being held responsible on a misdemeanor charge for building code violations at my property that I personally had nothing to do with. So I think that probably the way the building code is written makes it a little bit hard to enforce. Additionally, I'm not sure that the city, particularly code enforcement, has the staffing or the resources available. So that would be something to consider as well before moving forward with a formal inspection program.
Yes, and just to add to that, and again, I'm Debbie Holstenbach, representing Drucker and Falk and VAMA. Essentially in this code, I think that, again, we're not opposed to health and safety concerns and wanting to make sure that all of those are upheld from community to community. As a matter of fact, I believe that they should be. But I do think that we need to take a tougher look at how we're setting this up. This sounds to me like we're disguising it as a care of health and safety, but ultimately we are selecting specific spots that we think need to be dealt with. And I think ultimately, if we're going to hold one accountable, we need to hold all. And we need to come up with a better idea or program that initiates, not emergency calls to a property. As a previous speaker spoke, we don't want to discourage individuals from calling if they need fire, police, but what do those have to do with building code? It's different if they're calling in because of a building code violation, which I believe the 311 is there for that reason. But if they're calling 911, that shouldn't be holding them accountable to a building code. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Pinson Neal. I'm owner of Landmark Property Services. We manage roughly 1,300 units in the city of Richmond, and I've been managing property in the city of Richmond for over 35 years. I agree with everything that everybody else has said on the opposition to this. It needs to be more targeted, more specific, and some better ideas to go along with it. But all that being said, the city has a lot of teeth to deal with blight issues like this. Having been in this business and in the city for so many years, I've seen the letters, I've seen the comments with all the Department of Public Utility, so the police department, the fire department, and all the employees in the city. That everybody knows where the issues are and the problems are, and that should be where the focus is, and not make a large dragnet across the city to wrap everybody up into it. So I would just use the resources they currently have and fix those issues that come up currently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick McLeod. I am the CEO of the Virginia Apartment Management Association, and I wanted to speak with you today about the drafting of a rental inspection program. When I echo all the comments everyone said, and one of the things I wanted to bring to light is that what a lot of us don't think about is preventing bad actors is really a layered approach. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, because then you end up wasting time and money focusing over here when it's a melded approach of what you've done. Just to give an idea of that, a couple of the things that have happened over the years, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of what has to happen in rental transactions. There are a lot of rights actually already vested with the resident in this process. For example, we worked with several groups years ago on creating the tenant statements of rights. You cannot move into a rental unit in Virginia without signing a tenant statement of rights. The landlord cannot even go into court without producing the signed copy of the tenant statements of rights. That tenant statements of rights also goes into things like the move-in inspection report. Every resident gets a move-in inspection report on moving into a residence. That's by state code. On top of that, we have something called a tenant's assertion. If there is an issue that exists on a property that needs to be corrected and the landlord is not responsive, the tenant may file an assertion in court. They have to pay their rent, but they pay their rent into the courts, not to the landlord. Again, puts a lot of power in the hands of the resident to do that. Now, I know a lot of people are worried about, and Matthew Desmond wrote about this type of stuff, about people worried about retaliation. We have an anti-retaliation code in Virginia that can hold the landlord accountable for damages in that sense. So all of these things are part of a layered approach, but I think that's also why we need to be extraordinarily targeted with when we use the tool of the rental inspection program. We do not want to waste time and staff money on doing rental inspections when perhaps we could be spending that time on informing residents about their options and giving them the power to also affect that change, as opposed to putting it all in the city going after and having to be the one enforcing it on behalf of someone else. Let's use a melded approach on this, which was why I'd encourage you to look at a very targeted, efficient approach to a rental inspection program that really makes the most effective use of money and gets the best return for the residents in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition of item 1? Is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of item 1? If you are able, please form a line at the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Fleischer, and I am a member of Virginia Organizing and a property owner in the 1st District. My wife and I own a rental property, one small one. And I'm here to speak in support of Richmond's proposed rental inspection program. The program will help ensure that my family's investment is up to code, and that other nearby properties are as well, since they too affect the value of our property. My neighbor is so close that if a fire were to start due to poor maintenance, for example, it seems likely that our building would be damaged as well. An inspection would ensure, among other things, that my neighbor has working smoke detectors and safely maintained appliances. We are a simple mom and pop operation. We own one property, but The strikes me that the purpose of this rental inspection unit should be focused on larger property owners. And so I think a concern that small-time owners like us would be affected is really not a serious concern. We would like to suggest several small changes that we think will strengthen the ordinance. First, in Section 5163A, the draft uses the term blighted. Virginia Code allows for the use of blighted or deteriorating. Using blighted may generate concerns about redlining from landlords, tenants, or council members who otherwise might support the rental inspections. We encourage amending the draft to replace blighted with deteriorating. In that same section, paragraph D requires city officials to notify all property owners in designated inspection districts. We believe that the draft should be amended to require notification of tenants as well. In Section 5-165A, we don't understand why the draft proposes a waiting period of at least 90 days between establishing an inspection district and the initial inspection.
30 seconds.
We believe that 30 days should be more than enough time. Finally, in Section 5-165E, the draft addresses the number of units to be inspected in large multifamily developments. The minimum number of units to be inspected is set at 2. For developments that include dozens or even hundreds of units, this minimum would represent only a tiny fraction of the district. Please consider raising that minimum for any development with more than 30 units.
That is your time.
Thank you. And I did print out copies of these suggestions that I would like to distribute to all the members of council, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Hefner. As you all know, I've been working with a group of tenants, not with the logo that's on my shirt right now, with New Virginia Majority, but with Virginia Organizing over the past 2.5 years since this first resolution was put into place in February 2023 by Councilmember Lynch. And I think it's really surprising to me that this is the first meeting that any opposition is here. They have not attended any of the other meetings. And clearly, they have never sat with a tenant when they had to call 911 because a fire broke out because of a code violation, or when their ceiling fell in on top of them when they slept, because I have been. I've been there when those types of calls happen and people were displaced. And that's because we have a terrible slumlord issue in the city. And our current code enforcement model does not actually hold them accountable for what Virginia code allows. And so while when we made our demands 2.5 years ago, because that's how long we've been speaking about this, we're not just showing up today when the piece of legislation is on the table. We also recommended maybe making a shift on that particular language and making sure that the calls in that are because they're calling because of building code violations. Also, in the presentation, it was clearly stated that there is a push to have not rental inspection districts being large swaths. So simply opposing the piece of legislation because of that little piece is really going to limit us in our ability to move forward. I also highly want to encourage, I know one question that was asked in the presentation is how do we hold these landlords accountable who even through this process still are not being held accountable? I highly recommend when you all are considering your statewide legislative priorities, putting the warrant of habitability on your list. That allows the city to sue slumlords for habitability standards. Warrant of habitability, please include that on your list. That is how we do a multi-pronged approach because slumlords do not discriminate in the city of Richmond. They are in each of your districts, no matter the wealth, no matter any other demographics that you might think, they're all over the place. And we presented you petitions from each of your districts when we were here 2 months ago. And so I please ask you to move forward this piece of legislation as recommended by the Department of Planning Review. Thank you. And also thank you to the tenants who have been fighting 2.5 years to get this to
this desk. It would not be here otherwise. And so I thank all of you for your time and commitment to making this legislation move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amori. I'm a community housing organizer with New Virginia Majority, and I echo the sentiments of my colleagues that have come up so far. Mainly to note that this is a piece of legislation that your constituents, your people of your city have wanted to come to your tables and want to continue to pass through to your tables into code of law. So if that is not enough, I'm not sure what else can be. And other than that, as someone who has been on the ground organizing with tenants who are very much in support of this program for over a year now, I think it behooves us as people and you guys in your positions to do what is being asked of you. So in that regard, I hope you support the rental inspection program.
Thank you.
Hello again. My name is Omar El Gaddafi. I'm a community organizer at Legal Aid Justice Center. I support this ordinance. My roots are in tenant organizing around conditions issues in the 6th District. And I just wanted to share my experience. I didn't really come here to speak on this. I came to, be in support of it. But when I heard some of the comments from the opposition, I was moved. So a lot of times we talk about the affordable housing crisis in Richmond. We think it's just about, money and about wages and things like that. But the way it's showing up, especially since COVID, for me, the way I see it in my work is that landlords know they don't have to fix anything now. They know they don't have to fix anything because the demand is so high for housing. They know that they can put you out and go raise the rent and put somebody else in there. It was really crazy. Like my own mother, she had an issue with her roof and everything, and I worked with lawyers and attorneys. And when she told me, no, I can't say anything to my landlord, there was nothing I could say to her because I know that was real. That's real. She can't really, you can't do anything. So I think that the rental inspection district is very good because people do have a fear of retaliation. Everything that Rachel was saying and that the speaker after was saying is very true. It shows up everywhere, regardless of, what you might think of as an affluent neighborhood or whatever. There's still, you got VCU students and stuff staying in certain, apartments that are even in affluent neighborhoods, and they're going through stuff. They're going through a lot of crazy stuff in their apartments. And just some of the things that I was hearing, like about the options that tenants have, and that there's all these enforcement mechanisms. To file a tenant's assertion, you have to be current on your rent in the state of Virginia. So you got some large landlords, some of them are even in the room with us right now, that they have tenants that are behind on rent for years, and they know it because that tenant can never take them to court and say, hey, you got mold in my house. The retaliation code in Virginia is very difficult to even to use. I work with the housing attorneys every day, been working at Legal Aid Justice Center for 6 years.
30
We
seconds.
very rarely, I don't even think we've ever successfully used that code since I've been there. So I just wanted to share my experience with you guys in case, because I do this work and I've seen it on the legal side also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Alan Chipman. I live in the 3rd District. I'm the Executive Director of Initiatives of Change USA. Around 2 years ago, we did a large community outreach and listening sessions with Black and Latino members in the South Side of Richmond. And a huge part of what came out was a request for such a type of inspection program. And so I want to thank everyone who's been involved over these years in that process. I also just want to say that this isn't just the will of people in Richmond. House Bill 1615 in 2023, I think Delegate Marcia Price carried that, and it actually passed both houses in the General Assembly. It was vetoed by a governor who, ironically, has investments in real estate, used to work for real estate. But it's really people wanting to see responsibility and accountability on a bipartisan basis. The governor vetoed it because, again, it said, it's repetitive, it's not needed. But I think it's safe to say since 2023, we still have had issues around the living conditions provided by landlords not matching the dignity of some of their residents. And so I think it's still important for that. Sure, accountability should be targeted, but responsibility is for everyone. And this has been the will of people that we've been speaking with. I want to thank everyone who's been involved with it and ask that you pass it. And of course, no legislation is perfect, but let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have opportunity to address some of the issues that are there. And yes, there are some mom and pop landlords, but mom and pop are tenants too, and they need their rights. And I just am speaking support of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Hill. I'm a resident of the 2nd District. I'm here to speak in favor of this program. I own a single rental property. In my case, it's a pop and pop operation. And my first responsibility is to our tenants. And I just want to mention that almost every speaker on both sides of this has come up and said favorable things about the program. And that would suggest to me that you don't let this effort languish, even if it needs tinkering with. But things like if there's a 911 call from my rental property, my first concern is to my tenants. I do maintain the property so that if you need to come in, you feel like you need to inspect the property, I welcome you to come in. I think you'll find nothing. If you find something, I want to know about it so I can correct it. And further, if the time comes that I don't have the wherewithal to maintain the property in good condition, then I know that's time for me to sell that property to somebody that can. Thank you very much.
No clapping, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danielle Smith. I am a tenant in Richmond's North Side. I have spoken before Richmond City Council previously about some of my own experiences in rental housing dating back to when I was a child. I personally have experienced displacement due to black mold in my rental housing. I've also been working in housing policy and research for the last 7 years in both nonprofit and municipal government settings. I'm here today not only because I'm a tenant, I'm also the daughter of a mom and pop landlord formerly, and I am also the former housing services advocate for the city of Albany in Albany, New York. In that position, I worked with hundreds of landlords and tenants on navigating resources and helping both sides resolve their issues. So I would like to speak to some of the concerns from landlords previously, in particular with regards to the service calls. So in my professional experience, this is actually an important indicator of things such as code violations. Faulty fire systems in of itself is a code violation, of course. However, frequent police responses can also be tied directly to things such as landlord-tenant difficulties. We actually, in the city that I worked for previously, had a specific response code for landlord-tenant trouble. And this was directly correlated for us statistically with code violations and eviction filings. So this is definitely something that I would want to push back on a little bit. The other thing I would add is that the city of Albany, which I know this is preempted under Virginia legislation, but the city of Albany had a blanket rental inspection ordinance. So every rental property in the city was subject to this. The sky didn't fall and landlords didn't stop investing in the city. The ordinance was much stricter than this proposal. It actually provided a useful tool for city officials and residents. And as a tenant in that city as well, I felt safer knowing that the city had inspected the apartment I was applying for and that it had had a permit and someone had been in there and made sure it was safe. So I'm happy to answer any questions and provide, I have additional research from other cities. For example, in Asheville, North Carolina, residential fires fell by 50% after an inspection program was implemented. Rochester, New York, they found lower levels of blood lead among children. So there is a lot of research coming out of other places where they've implemented similar programs showing that this can be successful. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, again, from my professional experience as a former city employee in a city with an inspection ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anitra Devon. I'm a resident at Galloping Court. I've been there for about 6 years. They talk about safety. We don't feel safe where we're at. And that's just being honest. Between the drugs, the prostitution, it's just insane. And the gangs are coming back into the community. My son's autistic. He has high anxiety now because every time we walk out the door, he's hearing gunfighting. He's seeing drug addicts and everything else going on. Between Mo's situation, it's just been really insane. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. Also, when it comes to apartments, I don't understand why we don't have fire extinguishers in our units. Because any fire can break out, and what we're going to call for fire department. It's going to destroy everything in everybody's units. I think if we had fire extinguishers, in our units, that would help out. But as far as safety, we don't feel safe. It doesn't matter how long we call for maintenance reports or anything. Maintenance can take a year longer, and they don't come to us. We're like, we'll put it in a report. And so we'll call, and they be like, we lost a ticket. And we'll be like, we called you guys. Like, it took me a year just to get maintenance to come to my place to fix the mold. And my son was sick for a whole year, missing school. And I was getting in trouble. Going to have to go to juvenile court and everything because my son was getting sick really bad off of mold situation in our units. So I really don't understand. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Warren Campbell. I'm a community organizer and resident of the 1st District. I wasn't planning on speaking today because I think my colleagues and other residents have said most of what can be said about the rental inspection program. But Jim Hill was my old landlord, and I lived in the 2nd District for 4 years, and that was, I feel so blessed that there was someone who cared that lived next door. And I know that so many in this city don't have that. They don't have a landlord that cares about their health, and they won't do it unless they're forced to. Because they're willing to collect that check. And they would rather people live in a moldy apartment with the ceiling falling in and collect that check. I'm sorry, the opposition saying a tenant's assertion is a viable representation. Sure, it is possible to do a tenant's assertion, but when you have to be current on rent, and there are just so many factors when people are working over 50 hours, 60 hours a week in order to afford their apartment in the first place, you expect them to have money to come to court to face you? It's not reasonable. So that's why the city needs to step up. That's why the city needs to implement a rental inspection program where bad actors are targeted, because there are a lot of them. If you spend a week talking to tenants in this city, 1 week, you will find them, because they are everywhere, because landlords in this city are not held to a high standard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Madam Clerk, just for the record, because we have 2 other presentations, we're going to make the young lady in the pink jacket the last speaker for this paper. Thank you.
Peace, peace. My name is Dream Boyd with the 3rd District. I'm in support of the rental inspection program as my neighbors, Virginia Organizing, New Virginia Majority, and RTAP. My neighbors before me, we have been campaigning for 2 years, and this is the first time that we have had opposition with that. I believe is an opportunity for those in opposition to express their concerns, come to the table, join the conversation, and to create a plan that is worded correctly and everyone is held accountable. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peyton Young, and I'm actually here to speak on the last line item this afternoon, so I don't want to take too long. But I was inspired to speak by what is clearly a litany of people who have a similar experience to what I had when I was a graduate student living in Jackson Ward back in 2019. I lived in one of those apartments where a 5 foot by 5 foot hole dropped on my bed one morning because of a a leak in my apartment that not a soul would do anything for. It ended up costing me $3,000 in water bills when I was 23 years old, and I did not have the money for. I continued to report it to the Department of Utilities, and no one ever did anything about it and said, well, your landlord's responsible for it. Things came to a head when mushrooms started growing out of my ceiling. My landlord kept saying, oh, this is completely normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. No matter how many times I reported it to the city, no one would do anything about it. I actually had code enforcement come out to my property. It turns out my landlord was friends with the code enforcement representative who came out and said, don't worry about it. There's no mold in here. It's totally fine. There's no leak. And ultimately ended up having to leave after a person from the Department of Utilities said, if you don't leave, you're going to be in danger of some other part of this property falling apart, whether it's the roof or black mold or something else. And so ultimately I had to leave. But I say this to say I'm deeply concerned by the idea of anyone being in opposition of additional safeguards for renters in this city. Deeply concerned. And I think anybody who came up here to say that today needs to be concerned with themselves, that you don't care about the residents of this city enough to care about their health.
Please no clapping. Thank you.
But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. And thank you. I really appreciate the people who came up here to share their experiences. It was very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am here to support the proposal of the landlords, holding them accountable for how we live. These are pictures of my apartment, as I stated to y'all when I was up here earlier. And this is a picture of my kitchen with a board. My bathroom was leaking, and they took a board and posted over my cabinet and just slapped one slide of paint up there. And this has been there for like 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Ma'am. Yes, I want you to give all of them to them. These are my kitchen as well. You see how all the bottom paneling coming off. I done called for that. Same thing here. Ceilings, railings, all this is a part of them not doing maintenance. They'll give you a flyer saying they are. This is my wall broken in my daughter's bedroom. Yes, and this is the board over my kitchen sink where the water was leaking from the tub, and they just patched it up. So I thank y'all for caring, and I hope something changes. Yes, y'all can have these pictures because they do belong to RHA.
Thank you.
The public hearing is now closed. You can bring it back into the committee.
Well, I've heard a lot of very helpful feedback, and in fact, it's very interesting that there does seem even to be relatively universal approval for a version of this if it is well targeted, and that's really great to hear. And so I do believe that this is a good piece of legislation, though perhaps there are a couple of tweaks that could make it even better. And one of them relates to the notion of the emergency response calls. And so I was wondering to what extent the data is available or usable to understand what portion of emergency response calls are relevant to building code violations. Is this a simple thing to ascertain? Is it just correlated? I'm not sure if there's someone in the administration here who would be able to speak to that, but that's something I would like to understand so we can judge whether or not it's appropriate to use emergency response calls as a criteria.
Thank you. So in terms of the data, we are able to access and provide information on police calls, fire calls, and right going back for a span of 4 years. We also have data right on our building inspections and notices of violation. I would say it would be a pretty intensive effort to go through and I'll say match case by case in terms of like the particular nuances of the calls to the particular building code violation. I think, as one of the speakers said, the reason for having this in here was to just provide council with something that they could consider in terms of maybe as a proxy for underlying building code issues, and whether that may be something acute in terms of a call for a fire that goes back to some electrical issue or wiring issue, or maybe more chronic calls for respiratory distress that maybe go back to black mold or other things related in there. With that, and in terms of the things that were in the ordinance, again, are just recommendations for council to look at. Council could choose to ignore all of them, as long as they're finding when it's placing units into the program, go with the Code of Virginia, which talks about blight deterioration and the need to prevent blight deterioration to provide safe housing units. So I think if council wishes to amend that or strike that, it's up to them. But I would say also, as presented, it's discretionary in terms of using that criteria and making their determination for units to go into the program.
If we were in a situation where we were proposing a new district around a building, for example, and the criteria being used in that case did lean heavily towards this emergency call data in this example, like in that particular case, would we be able to ask about the nature of those calls on a case-by-case basis? Is that something that we could dig into if needed during the legislative district drawing process? Sure.
I mean, I guess council can dig as deep as it like to, and administration could provide information as much as we have it. I think that goes back to one of the reasons for recommendations for adding smaller number of units at a time. It allows for more analysis in terms of what may be going into the program. And I also think and then we could discuss more in terms of separating the program out from the districts or the houses, the units that will be in the program. In terms of being able to provide, and I think also in the criteria, one of the reasons for having it was to also include a provision for tenants who petition to get included into the program. I think in some cases we may not have the data for number of building code violations, or we may not have data. It may not support. There may not be a lot of calls for service, and in some cases it's because tenants are afraid to call. And so I think when you look at those three, for me to lean more heavily on that third criteria of knowing what the program is, knowing what the program entails, and with that, tenants still coming forward and saying, yes, we want to be part of that program, I would recommend providing more weight on that in the decision making, because the data may or may not tell some things. But again, I think that's part of the process when you talk about whether or not to add units into a program. It's taking that very deep dive into what you're doing.
I think the last thing I was going to say is I do believe that this legislation could benefit from a little more, assurance that the buildings that end up in district will be the ones that have actually been flagged by criteria such as emergency calls, tenant requests, and a history, and not just being, on the same block as someone else, right? But getting more so than that, I see that we having the council having the ability to use their discretion, I think is probably still gonna be necessary as long as we justify what we're doing. But I think that we probably want to, when we pass this legislation, I would suggest that we be very clear that districts will not include buildings that have not kind of qualified on their own. You know, that the buildings in the districts will only be the ones that actually meet the criteria, but still giving us the discretion to say what the criteria were used. All right, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and for all of you all that have come down to speak in support and opposition to the rental inspection. So I want to make sure that we're clear. If we pass this paper before us as it is currently written, some of the concerns that have been brought up that I want to make sure I'm clear on. One, with the passing of this paper, there actually is no rental inspection district. This paper allows for council to create such.
That is correct. As written, it establishes the program. However, we would not be able to implement it. There are no units in a district or part of the program to inspect. So it is on the books as a program, but there's actually no active inspection program as part of that implementation. Council would first have to then go back and amend this ordinance to create a district. And as discussed, that district can be as small as one parcel.
Okay. So did you not make a statement earlier about apartment units that were 10 units?
In terms of inspections, the number of apartments, number of units that were allowed to inspect, there is a cap on the initial inspection that we're only allowed to go into 10%. And those 10% are decided by the inspectors or the inspection team. So we'll pick 10 units or 10% of the units. If all of those units come back compliant, we are done with that property.
So if we get a complaint or request for a unit to be inspected and it's one unit, if I'm understanding you correctly, we could create a rental inspection district for that one unit.
If it is a single family house on one parcel, you could create, if you found that it was blighted and meeting the criteria in state code, yes, you could make a district as small as a single family unit.
Okay. But we would not be able to get one unit complaint. If it's in a multifamily development, we would respond to that one complaint. And if the criteria from our inspection warrant all of the criteria for a rental inspection, that with that total unit, say the housing complex, the multifamily housing complex has 75 units. We got one request. Does that mean that if that one unit inspection meets those criteria, the entire 75 would be subject to the destination by just because it's one building?
If it is a reactive inspection, no. And so just maybe to explain the nuance. So let's say we take a complex with 75 units and council decides to make that a rental inspection district. If we go in and do our initial inspection, right, the proactive inspection, and find something in one of those units, we are allowed to inspect every unit, all 75 units. That is, and then we work to get compliance. And then once all those units are compliant, it gets 4 years until we can go back in and inspect them. Let's say in the interim, right, we get that all done. Somebody gives us a call and says, hey, a year's gone by, there's something wrong with my unit. We go back into that unit and there's a finding. We only focus on that unit. We are not allowed to inspect all of those other units again until that 4-year period is up from the finding.
Okay. Um, let's talk a little bit about the definition of blighted versus deteriorating. There's a recommendation that we take blighted out and use deterioration. What's the difference between us having both of those definition in the ordinance?
Sure. I, in working, and I'm looking at the city attorney, in working with their office, recommended following this Code of Virginia as close as possible. If council desires to take out the word blighted or replace it with deteriorated, and it still meets Code of Virginia requirements, I do not have any issue with that. I just wanted to make sure that we're in compliance with what the code says we need, the language we need to have in there.
Okay. Madam Chair, you need to regulate me if I'm going too long into the questions, but I want to make sure I'm getting as much clarity as I can. There was a recommendation, and which I think is a very strong recommendation, as it relates to the ordinance having a component that really addresses informing the tenants of their rights, and not only informing them of their rights, but including processes of how we provide enough guidance that they can take advantage of their rights as a part of their knowledge and obligation as a tenant, but also the obligation of the landlord. Is there any reason why we do not have that component as a part of this rental inspection ordinance?
Only if Code of Virginia would prohibit it. I think that is something we have talked, as we talked, if this were to get adopted and implemented, just how we would go about, right, thinking through that process and education being part of that process. Again, if council would desire to add that amendment, I think in terms of right notifying the tenants, so long as it's compliant with Code of Virginia, administration would have no issue with adding that provision to it. It adds a small expense, but I think in terms of something that's worth it, in terms of, again, being able to provide just information that is publicly available and is law, so that tenants are well aware of what is happening, in their complex.
So that's notification of the landlord as well as the tenant, but also as it relates to the education and tenants' rights and how to exercise those rights. So the concern that I've had from the beginning of this initiative is that, and it has been said, most frequently landlords, slum landlords, as it's been defined, or irresponsible landlords that don't keep their property up to code, may also be thought to be to a large degree those that are renting that have the most least expensive rental properties in the city. The concern that comes along with that has been mentioned as well. If you can't, if a tenant doesn't feel any security and reporting landlords that are not in compliance because they are behind on their rent. How does this legislation makes provision to give the tenants some security or sense of security or options for security, although they are behind in their rents? The housing condition is more important, and what the purpose of this legislation is for safety and housing codes. How do we address that? And then what comes along with that, the fear and the concern is about being evicted and addressing eviction secondary to inspections that needs to be done and the costs associated with that without having any control over rent caps.
So I want to be clear in terms of what the program cannot do. As given its provisions in the building code, it cannot do anything to actually prevent an eviction. It cannot do anything to actually prevent an increase in rent after improvements are made to make the building code compliant. We are not allowed to have those provisions as part of this ordinance in terms of enforcing the building code. There's probably a whole lot of separate legislation that could be discussed about rent and the ability to control rent, which is limited in the Commonwealth. But I want to be clear that this paper cannot do that. I think one of the things that it could do or does do in terms of, I'll say, some protection, right now, a tenant calls in, with an issue, and then we'll go and visit, and we need consent of the tenant, right, to enter the unit. And in some cases, right, we'll have a finding, there's a violation. And so we notify the property owner. So the property owner, right, generally can figure out who called that in. It's probably the tenant that called that in. And so again, there's rules on the books about retaliation and evictions and things like that. But that landlord knows who the tenant is who started this process. And I think that's a reason why a lot of tenants don't call. In a rental inspection program, right, if council elects to put a complex into that program, city is the one who's deciding, right? We're going to go pick 10% of those units. We're going to go pick those 7 units to go inspect. And if we have a finding in one of those, right, that is not tenant driven. That is us just picking. And if we pick one that's right, in terms of having a finding, I think it is not tied back to any particular tenant. Again, that does nothing in terms of like, if we have findings in all 75 units and all 75 units need improvements to be compliant with building code, that's real money that landlord needs to spend. And they may turn around and say, hey, next time, renew your lease, I'm raising your rent to pay for those improvements that I had to make. But I think there is some space between any individual tenant, I'll say, bearing the brunt of like, hey, I'm the one who started this process to ask for, safe housing.
Okay, so I'm not sure how council will get the information to consider any particular location as a rental inspection district. And how does that come before us? Is that something that, any council person or by some means or the other, it comes to council and it goes through the legal process with a proposed paper after the amendments have been made so that we can do that? Is that the process by which we would get a request?
Sure. I think there's a variety of ways you could approach it. If you were to adopt the paper, or even as amended as presented as just the program, and say, hey, I want to do districts later, you could ask us to provide information in terms of the criteria that's outlined there. So we can provide you data maps on where we found violations, where the police service calls are, and if we've received any petitions, we can provide that information for you. And you can use that just to start the conversation of like, are there areas where we maybe want to consider doing districts? Or if we were to get a petition from tenants, you could say, all right, well, here's a complex where somebody's been, tenants have an interest in doing a rental inspection district, and then we could find the data that relates to that particular parcel. And so we could do it that way as well. I think it would be, again, as, council directed staff administration to find that information. Ultimately, that would help them make that decision. It can be, again, trying to find data to support a particular district, or just providing you all the data and then going through and saying, all right, maybe we want to workshop this or go through and figure out what we may want to propose, for one district or several districts, or maybe no districts at all. But I think that is something that, through a request, we could provide that information for you before making that amendment to add units into the program.
Last two questions. The primary objective that we are trying to achieve is to make sure that all housing is up to code, and we're providing safe housing for people to live in. So you have a landlord that will say, I can't afford to make the improvements. You have a tenant that one of the greatest fears is being evicted. How do we ensure that we are accomplishing the objective that's at hand? A landlord can't afford to make the improvements. A tenant has no security that they will not be evicted and or priced out. How do we incorporate achieving our objective by addressing those two big elephants that are in the room that will prevent us from being successful? How does the city, who makes a decision to create this initiative, put the necessary things in place to accomplish our one and only sole objective?
Yes. So I think, yeah, the objective is very clear in terms of, right, safe, sanitary housing. Not always the prettiest or fanciest, but right, it is decent and it is safe. I think one of the things that, I would recommend asking of us is during that process of creating, or considering properties to be added into the program, is to also provide, that data, but also provide an implementation plan in terms of like, how would we actually go forth in terms of inspecting, right? The questions I raised about, how many units are there? What resources do we have in terms of our PMCE inspectors? I'll say worst case scenario, right? We find something in every unit, and that could be an ongoing, commitment to continue to reinspect everything is compliant. Part of that implementation may be in some of our larger complexes, and Deputy Coward can talk to, right? Working with landlords proactively to say, hey, you've got some units that are vacant, that are up to code, hold them. As we start through and going on, doing inspections, if we have findings and a finding that requires somebody to become temporarily unhoused, it's much easier for you as a landlord to be able to house them somewhere else on your property than house them somewhere offsite. And it also retains that sense of community for that tenant who's there. So I think in terms of understanding, like, just because, again, you look at those 75 units, if we were to do a complex with 300 units, right, I don't think it would be prudent to do all 300 units in a week and just create mass chaos. So while it's not fair for somebody to be living in housing conditions that aren't safe and sanitary, again, it's this balance of we also don't want to unhouse somebody right away. So thinking about how do we implement and providing or asking us for an implementation plan, like if we put these units in, how will we as staff do it? And I'll say just also beyond PMCE, how we work with our colleagues and HCD or Human Services or external agencies like Legal Aid Society in terms of making sure, again, the tenants know their rights and responsibilities as we go through that process. I think that would be something to come back in terms of that district conversation.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Punk, for your presentation, for all the questions. This was one that, has carried a lot of concern and care. And I also want to thank my colleagues for their input, and also my colleagues who actually put this resolution forward, because it happened before I even came on council. But I'm just glad that we are here today to continue this process, and to everyone that came out to support it. For those who aren't even in favor, I don't necessarily see it as not being in favor. It's information. Right? We don't have all the answers. And so this is why we do the work that we do. We put these resolutions forward and we do our due diligence to ensure that we're doing what is best for the greater good of Richmond. This paper is to support the residents. I personally have a lot You say you don't know what districts to start. I can tell you where to start. So I know that this paper is going to do, as my colleague Ms. Robinson stated, what we want it to do. And there are, and we are open to listening and to hearing. And so we hear all of you. We hear all of the concerns because our goal is to not just put something forward just to be putting it forward. And as we continue to, work collaboratively, not just those of us on committee, but the entire city and the people who also are stakeholders in this process, to ensure that we're moving Richmond forward in a way that residents have exactly what we're requiring, which is safe housing, sanitary, affordable, and all of those things that we are here today for. So I guess it is the consensus of my team here, right, that you are saying we are going to amend this paper. What is the consensus here? But yes, we will do some amendments, and so we'll bring that back. Is that for the next in September? Yeah. Oh, yeah, because there is no meeting in August. So we will get with you to bring forth those amendments, and by the meeting, was it 18th? September 18th, the September meeting? I believe the September 18th meeting, our goal is to have those amendments done and ready to move this paper forward. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to, I need a motion to amend.
Did you move? Did you move?
I moved.
Well, and I second it.
What exactly is
Short
the
move,
motion? Are y'all recommending for approval with amendment?
Continuance in order to amend and continue.
So to continue?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you're calling for the vote, aye.
And we had a motion?
All right. I move to continue this to September to include some amendments as discussed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
The committee is voting on the motion to continue item 1, ordinance 2025-161 to the September 16th Land Use, Housing, and Transportation Standing Committee meeting. Mr. Britton?
Aye.
Vice Chair Robertson?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
And Madam Clerk, can we move quickly through the to the next presentation, which is the special permit, since we already on it. We might as well do that one last.
Good afternoon, Leo Mente, Deputy Director, PDR. This afternoon, I'm here to talk about the special use permit and provide some data on how far we've come with that ordinance since it was approved by City Council. So just a quick introduction. I want to talk about what a special use permit is. Per city ordinance, the City Council may authorize what we call an SUP to build structures or use land in areas where the regular zoning regulation would not allow. I think the history behind it is that the City of Richmond zoning ordinance quite outdated. I believe the last update was in the 70s, and as time goes on, society has evolved a lot, and so there was a need for an ordinance to allow certain development in zoning district that would, on a regular day, would not allow for those development to take place. SUPs are granted to, we say, the owner of a property. That means the SUPs are granted to the land itself. And so since it's granted to the land, it can be transferred to property owners when those properties are probably transferred to a new owner. The SUPs are not approved in isolation. It does not mean if anybody applies for an SUP, City Council should just go ahead and approve it. There are certain criteria or parameters that were outlined in the zoning in the ordinance before an SUP should be approved. And one of them being that for an SUP to be approved, we have to make sure that it's not detrimental to safety, health, morals, and general welfare of the community involved. The council also has to ensure that an approval of an SUP shouldn't create congestion in streets, right-of-way, and other public areas. Approving an SUP should also not create hazards from fire, panic, or other dangers. And also approving an SUP should not create overcrowding of land and cause an undue concentration of population. SUP approval should not adversely affect or interfere with public or private schools, parks, playgrounds, convenience, and other improvements, both most especially in public spaces. And then lastly, approval of an SUP should not interfere with adequate lights and air. All these criteria were taken into consideration to ensure that the general approval of an SUP should not have any adverse impact on people, citizens, and the general environment that people find themselves in. In order to ensure that all these criteria are met, we work internally, that is the city staff, to ensure that we review every specific SUP, taking into consideration city ordinances, codes, and then considering the previous criteria that were outlined, we all work together as a team, from PDL, land use review, zoning review, building plans review, and then our alliance partners in DPW, urban forestry, right-of-way, DPU as well also reviews it, and we have our fire department also on board. All of these agencies work together to ensure that before we submit any recommendations to Planning Commission and City Council for the final votes, we take into consideration the plans and make sure that everything that is supposed to be on those plans, or everything that is supposed to be provided to ensure that the SUPs does not have any adverse impact are really adhered to, and not to ensure that even as City Council approves it, it will not have any negative impact on not just the property but surrounding land uses as well. This is a legislative process, and so we do a lot of notification. With regards to the legal requirements, we do publish in the public newspapers 21 days and 7 days before the public hearing. We post signs on the property 15 days before the public hearing, and then we do mail notification to property owners within 150 feet of the subject property. And this is done before 7 days before the public hearing. This is to ensure that citizens or everybody that is concerned with this property is aware of what is happening, for them to give them the opportunity to give their opinions, whether in opposition or in favor, just like what was done here. But we think this is a progressive way for us to give people prior notice of what is going to happen within not just their surrounding users, but in general, the neighborhoods that they find themselves in. And then as a department, we do what we call additional efforts. We advise applicants to always reach out to their council members, adjacent property owners, and civic association. We do believe that properties do not exist in isolation, so it's always good to talk to your property owners or anybody that has I would say stakeholders within that community who might have an opinion or a view on the proposed development. We also do send out emails or contact other civic associations within that neighborhood where the SUP process is going to be happening. And this has been very informative. It's been very helpful, and we've always got feedback from civic associations, especially when we reach out to them to let them know about pending SUP cases. So just to give some data on how far we've come over the past 5 years, from the charts showing how many SUPs we receive over the years, and also not just the applications that we receive, but how many processed and presented to the Planning Commission. And you could see from the bar graph that it's been very progressive. There's never been a dull moment ever since this ordinance was introduced. From the year 2020 to 2025, it's a lot of applications coming in. And this is to show that this is a progressive ordinance that has allowed for development that, on a regular cases would not have happened. I've had a chance to work for 6 different cities before coming to the city of Richmond. This is one of the most progressive ordinances that I've seen throughout my career. And if we look at the numbers, in 2021, 118 applications, 113 being reviewed by Planning Commission. That is to say, without the SUP, we probably would not have gotten 113 developments coming to the city of Richmond. If you look at 2024, 125 applications and having 88 being reviewed by Planning Commission, that is showing how progressive this ordinance has been and the benefits or the additions that it has brought into the city of Richmond's land uses. So the SUP's major role was to say waive or allow development that the current zoning ordinance wouldn't have allowed. We did an analysis to find out what aspects of the zoning ordinance does the SUP mostly waive. And per our analysis, we realized that most of them had to do with lot areas. People wanted to do development on properties that the current zoning would not allow based on the lot area requirements. We also realized that a lot width requirement was also a hindrance to certain development. The yard, which is the setbacks. So sometimes people have the lot area, but the setback requirements would not allow those development to take place. And then also the lot coverage. Certain development could fit into space, but the lot coverage was not enough for them to meet the requirements of the zoning district or the zoning ordinance. And therefore, the only way to make this work was to use the SUP to approach it in a very positive way. But all of these, like I said, are not done in isolation. We take into consideration the requirement that was aligned, Richmond 300, and every development regulation that would allow this development to exist well and coexist well with other development in space. So we took a look at what requirements the SUP waives. As you can see on the pie graph, what kind of uses that the SUP has allowed to happen in space. Particularly if you look at the commercial uses, only 10%. The reason I highlighted that was that the SUP, per the use that has allowed, it's not granting businesses or commercial uses for profits. Most of the uses that the SUP has actually allowed, it's more of residential. If you look at single family development, two family development, ADUs. So that is to say the SUP did not come in to support some business organizations that wanted to make money, but it came in to help more I'll call residential users, which according to the Richmond 300 is very, very critical to the growth of Richmond. We always talk about housing crisis in almost every discussion, and you could see that the SUP has contributed to most of this, allowing a lot of housing units in the city. There have been times when certain concerns have come up about using SUPs to allow for people to make profit, but that is not what the SUP has been used for. It has allowed people in Richmond to have places to stay. That allows for single family homes, two family homes, and a lot of detached family homes as well. We also took a look at what zoning district do we see a lot of these SUPs, and mostly in the R6 and R5. Mostly the R6 is the areas around the Fan District, and R5 we are looking at somewhere in the West End. But in general, those have been the major areas where we've seen a lot of SUPs being, applied for. Some of the reasons being that there's more strict regulations in those areas, and most of the buildings, most of the lots platted there were platted before the zoning ordinance, and so to ensure conformity to current trends in development, a lot of SUP applications have come out from the R6 and the R5 zoning. Also taking a look at the neighborhoods where we see these SUPs, the Fan being about 151 applications in just the Fan over the past 5 years, and then the minimum being Carytown. But all in all of these have been going around all the neighborhoods, and like I said earlier, majority of them being residential units, which have really helped in places where on a regular day wouldn't have been allowed per the zoning district. So In general, I would say the SUP has, just like every ordinance, it has its, pros and cons. But in general, looking at the benefits or what we've been able to add to the city limits with regards to development, it's been a positive impact. We've learned a lot of lessons from it, and we are always doing our best to make sure that we work with developers to ensure that whatever development comes in for the SUP aligns with the ideals of Richmond 300 and the criteria outlined in the city ordinance for City Council to consider before approval. I believe this brings my presentation to an end. We'll be willing to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. We're not going to take any questions at this time just because we have another presentation. If we have, can we just send them directly to you?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, we need to do an amendment to our last motion. Mr. Breton.
So I moved to forward it to the general city council meeting in September in order to amend it at that point. And then 20th of July? Yeah, all right. I hope we're ready to amend it by July 28th. All right. So we are going to forward it to council with the hope of amending it by July 28th general council meeting. That's what I motion. That's my motion to move it to July 28th council. That's a procedural thing, yeah.
So recommendation to approve with an amendment? Okay.
Just, Madam Chair.
The committee is voting on the motion.
Is there an amendment? What, do we have it? Yes.
So we don't. So we have to scramble to piece together all the amendments we've heard and make sure we agree on them, and then yeah. I mean the like, for example, the bullet points such as these. It's similar to this. We have amendments. Well, so we're going to forward it to general. Well, I'm just procedurally have to forward it to council on the 28th.
I will do. Miss Ashley has a point.
Can you hear me with this? Generally, even with an ordinary time frame, we would want the specific amendment set forth before a motion to forward to council with amendments could be made. This council meeting is less than a week away. So I would advise that to give everybody time to ensure that the amendments are what you all want and that there is, good and real consideration of what we're doing for you.
And just to be clear, so that there's no confusion, we just want to make sure we're doing this right. So sorry that it seems like it's all over the place, but what we want to do is we want to continue this paper so that we can ensure that the proper amendments get into it. So we're going to forward it.
Yes. So, yeah. Yes, you're continuing to the September land use meeting. Yeah.
And then the second update is I deeply, deeply apologize to Ms. Payton. Is that your name? We are not going to be able to have the cultural discussion because we are really, really behind. And today was a loaded agenda. We had every intention on getting that as a part of this conversation. But as you see, there are a lot of pressing issues specifically around housing that we're trying to address. So we will talk to you offline about setting up another time. I know the Planning Commission has a separate committee that is working on your paper. And so we will follow up with you on that. Thank you. Mr. Nesmith, thank you so much for your patience. We appreciate you. And look forward to hearing your presentation.
Got myself out of that seat. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Jones, Vice Chair Ellen Robinson, Councilman Breton, and other members who are not members of the committee, Councilwoman Tremel, and when Lynch gets back. I am as CEO, I am very on behalf of the Board of Commissioners as well, I am honored and humbled to be back here before all of you and to appear before this committee. I am proud to report that we have some items that we gave you in your packet. To the left side of your packet, or the items that this committee specifically asked us to follow up on and that you wanted. It is one item is not in there, and that is the Residents' Bill of Rights that will be emailed to each of you today. It is what is in the Creighton Court MDA and that Bill of Rights. It is something that we want to and will put in the Mosby MDA as well. We're having community meetings soon and want to present that first to the residents and want to do the same thing and will do the same thing with Gilpin to present the same Residents' Bill of Rights to them in our upcoming meetings, which are August 28th and September 6th. You asked me to come here and to talk about several things. One was our annual accounting and funding. Two, plans for the future of public housing. And three, a program for home ownership. First, on the RHA's annual accounting and funding, on behalf of our chief operating officer and her entire team and our other employees that helped out, I'm proud to report that last month our outside auditor completed its 6-month audit, and for the first time in many, 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 many years, RHA received no findings. That is a clean audit for the first time in many, many years. And that was a result of a lot of late nights and weekends. And also want to give a shout out to the chair of our Board of Commissioners Finance and Admin Committee, Commissioner Lewis, who chairs that committee. Notwithstanding that accomplishment, there are many financial challenges when we look to the volatility of the budget and the proposed cuts at the federal level. RHA needs to, those budget cuts are going to hit the very population that we serve in public housing. In fact, 80% of our funding comes from our regulator, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And for any organization, that's not good economics, and that's not a good way to run any business. And that's one of the reasons why at RHA, we want to get about the business, what other housing authorities have done here in the Commonwealth and around the country, quite frankly, and that is to use our 501c3 nonprofit wholly owned by RHA, the Richmond Development Corporation, to advance redevelopment. Again, that is something that other housing authorities in the Commonwealth that they're doing. To do what? Among other things, to attract unrestricted revenue for programs for public housing residents, like self-sufficiency, job training, better health care in our big six, and where appropriate, home ownership. Because quite frankly, God, our Lord Jesus Christ, did not intend for public housing residents like myself and others to live in public housing forever. Public housing, as defined by federal legislation, is transitional housing and not housing of last resort. Number two, RHA future plans for public housing. We want to make sure that our public housing residents do not continue to live in concrete cinder block buildings.
Mr. Nesbitt, which slide are you on?
I'm on page 2.
You got it, Mr. Madam Chair.
So I just did funding, what's in front of you. That's page 1. And if you go to the next page, I'm at the, okay, you want me to click. Okay, look at that. So at the very top, you see there, I'm going to summarize. I just say, look, with the federal challenges we know at the federal level with budget cuts and the volatility, we know despite some, some things that we've done at RHA, we're faced with that fact. And as I said, when We get 80% of our funding from one funder, that's U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That is no way to run a business, no way to run any enterprise. In fact, what we want to do, as I said, is to do what other housing authorities have done and this are doing in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that is using its 501c3 wholly owned development arm to actually develop. And again, as I said, our nonprofit is not just used for the purpose of developing. It is used to attract unrestricted private funding for, among other things, for resident programs. As I mentioned, I'm down at the bottom of page 2. Number 2, RHA's future plans for public housing. We want to make sure that public housing does not continue, public housing residents do not continue to live in concrete and cinder block buildings like in Gilpin. In Gilpin, we have some of the oldest infrastructure from Miami all the way up to New Hampshire. That makes it very difficult for us. Anytime we go in and make improvements, it's like putting a Mercedes-Benz engine into a 1939 car. It breaks down immediately. RJ's plans is to ensure that our future public housing redevelopment plans aligns with Mayor Vula's vision and that of City Council's Richmond 300 master plan that prioritizes equitable and sustainable growth in Richmond. I want to take a personal privilege to thank Councilman Ellen Robinson for her leadership in offering an important amendment when this body, the full committee, was debating the Richmond 300 plan and made sure that public housing was included as a growth node in part of that Richmond 300 plan. In fact, we want public housing. Some people ask me, what's your public housing look like in Richmond? We want public housing to look like what you see in Armstrong Renaissance, where you have mixed income communities, while preserving historic legacy areas like Jackson Ward. Now that we're developing Creighton Court and are in the process of continuing to have community conversations about redeveloping Mosby and Gilpin, we want to be smart and intentional about which of the remaining 3 public housing sites we should proceed with next. And of course, that means assessing many factors, including the ability to finance the project. That is, where is that funding going to come from? As an example, Gilpin is to be developed in 10 phases. The total cost of those 10 phases is $466 million. And that's at this time here. We know what the future costs will look at to redevelop. Accordingly, we must attract private sector funding and investors. But we must do so within a concept of public-private partnership, that sort of structure where RHA is the public partner in any transaction and deal. And in fact, that is something that we have done differently. I'm going to take a moment here that's not in my written remarks. In fact, in the Gilpin redevelopment plan and the MDA, yes, that was approved by our board, I put something in there that's never in any real estate development deal in this city. And as the chairman of the board came to me, Steve, I'm tired of poor people making money off of poor people. I said, so what should we do? And so he said, well, I think they should reinvest, just like banks have to reinvest back in their communities based on the CRA standards. And so what I said was, we intentionally put in the procurement that whomever the winning bidder was for Gilpin, they had to, and they must, reinvest a portion of their profits back into the community. No real estate development in this city has that. And they will do so with having a conversation with the residents about what they want. What's that reinvestment look like? Is that a Boys and Girls Club? Is that job training? Whatever it is, the residents will decide. That language is in the Gilpin MD, and I'm really proud of that fact. Getting back to the redevelopment of public housing here with the remaining 3 our sites, Our RHA Board of Commissioners will be meeting this fall to determine and consider several strategies to redevelop our public housing community and to redevelop them in partnership with City Council, Mayor Vula, and local affordable housing stakeholders and tackle the issue of affordable crisis in this city. You know, it's so interesting because, and I know I'm supposed to use the clicker, I haven't because I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about this because I grew up in public housing, and I feel really, really passionate about the fact that some people believe that it's okay for people to live in public housing forever. No, we want to give people an opportunity to move to self-sufficiency and where appropriate, homeownership. Because when we do that, we then open up that safety net and we can take those thousands of people who are on our waiting list and say, we can bring you into that our safety net. And that is really, really important. On our last item, and that is number 3, RHA programming for homeownership. We are working diligently to give our families we serve the dream of homeownership in the following ways. One, we are in preliminary conversations with Mayor Vula's administration to partner up with the City Council's down payment assistance program, which City Council authorized for city employees who are first-time homeowners. And we're trying to identify which of those city employees or public housing residents, so the city employees can not only take advantage of the down payment assistance that this body authorized, but also partner with RHA's homeownership program. Number 2, our self-sufficiency program, which prepares families to become self-sufficient, where they can learn how to budget their finances and improve their earning potential and prepare them from home ownership. Number 3, we have partnered with local nonprofits and national loan partners and financial institutions to identify funding and down payment assistance for housing counseling. And yes, I am on the last page. I guess I won't score well for this, where we have partnered with national homeownership groups as well. And we will continue to refer clients to some of our local non-partners to do what? Make sure they get pre-homeownership counseling, mandatory, and homeownership budgeting so they can stay in their homes and not get foreclosed on. That's very, very important. 4, RHA has revised and updated our agency's administrative plan and our ACOP annual plan that our Board of Governors most recently approved. And we submitted recently that plan to HUD to ensure that the Housing Authority policies to promote homeownership, to provide clear expectations for families and the PHA, and to protect our families from predatory lending. Number 5, in the upcoming months, RHA will host a series of meetings, both in person and online, to assist families with starting that homeownership journey. These events will be for public housing, residents, and voucher holders, and will be supported by RHA's residential Department of Resident Services. So those are my remarks, and I'm open to some questions.
For the sake of time, we have questions, but I am going to ask my colleagues if they can keep them to 2 questions. If you have it. All right, thank you.
Sure. I would like you to speak to why you feel it's necessary to partner with the RDC arm and why it's insufficient for our goals to perform all the development solely using RHA as the administrator, and why you think it's necessary to use the RDC arm instead.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. That is because our RHA is not allowed to, as a recipient, to receive philanthropic and foundation dollars. We just made a presentation several months ago to one of the largest foundations in this Commonwealth. You know, the first thing they said, do you have a 501c3 entity to receive those dollars? RHA cannot be the recipient of it. And we've talked with the MacArthur Foundation, some others. We've talked with some others, and they said you must have a 501c3. That's number 1. And number 2, we must use it, and that's just to receive additional funding to do all the things for public housing residents. And last, we need to have that the RDC to receive again those investor funds. With RHA cannot do that.
And with respect to the RDC, how would you feel about opening up the board membership of the RDC to include city council members, or as well as residents of your Gilpin Court and other housing projects?
Right. So I think with some city council members, we're voting on things. There may be some conflict. As a lawyer myself, there'll be some, I think, obvious conflict of interest there. But I think on the issue of residents, yes, we have made as a body, that is the Board of Commissioners, that we've been listening. Our new mantra is that we've been listening, we've been learning, and we think we've understand. We're trying to build consensus. And yes, the board this fall, the Board of Commissioners, will be voting to have a resident on the RDC board with voting rights. And so we believe that that's having resident voices there is very, very important.
Okay. So I think we're getting fixated on the structure of the RDC and the model and all that stuff, right? So I'm just going to ask two very critical, important questions because it cuts right to the heart of this issue, right? One is, do you have an inventory of all of the landlords citywide that are taking housing choice vouchers?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that number?
I don't know what the number is. Apologize, but I don't know the numbers. I think I can probably ask someone here, but you know what that number is?
Is it possible to get it to us? Can you get it to us at the next meeting?
I don't have to wait.
Email it to us.
Yep, I can email that to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
That's the most critical question, right? Because what you're, regardless of how you develop, if you do a mixed income housing model where, if it's similar to Creighton, you've got 35 project-based units out of, 504, right, that were there previously. Regardless if you, do no project-based units and you just give everybody, somehow HUD grants us housing choice vouchers for everyone, right? Like the challenges, and I think where we as council people who are responsible to the community members and responsible to the residents feel the most heartburn is any type of redevelopment that you do in the context of an extreme affordable housing crisis and in a time where we have an extreme lack of inventory across the city, across the region of units that are housing people who are at 40% of the AMI and below. When you say you're going to take the units that are in Gilpin or any unit offline without a thoughtful and intentional plan to ensure that those residents have a guarantee that they are going to get into another unit, be it back into your, in the original Gilpin footprint or otherwise, it's reckless and irresponsible, right?
So, yep, I agree with you. And so I'm glad you raised that. But in the interest of time, we're doing two things. You're absolutely right. One of the things that we've got with our plan is that we've built in a financial incentive plan for landlords to take our vouchers. We've also given the residents an incentive plan to go take that voucher and to go find. So we understand the difficulty there. And we're going to crack down on those landlords that say not in our community, because legally, as a lawyer, you cannot discriminate based on if someone has a voucher. But to your Councilman Lynch, you've got a really good point. And what we're going to do is that we're coming up with that plan. Where our target is August 15th is when we're going to come up with the relocation plan and the Section 18. It's all going to be in there. And I did promise to share that with all of you, but you're spot on. We're going to have that plan. It's going to be an intentional and thoughtful plan, right? We have 781 units in Gilpin. Where are those 2,000 families going to go? So it's going to be in that plan. I want to say one other thing to your point, which is a good point. We're doing something that's different, right? We're doing, hold on one second. We are doing I won't speak, but she had a good point. Thank you. We're doing what's called a build first strategy. So 10 phases. So let's say the first phase or 3 buildings we would demolish. What we're going to do is build right there a building on the footprint of Gilpin. So those residents would go into that building, a build first strategy. They would go into that building to reduce a dislocation, and the kids, you have your children, they don't go to another school. So we have a build first strategy in there. And the other thing that my Learn it. VP just came up to me is that we do have a draft though, although you're going to get the actual plan. That's what you mentioned. We do have a draft plan here in the packet. I don't know if you got a packet. I'll give it to you. The overdue of our proposed relocation plan, but this is not the final plan. But it will be. We'll be producing that, and it'll be very thorough. And I think that even some of our members on our board that brought that issue up. Where's the plan? So we'll be having that plan August 15th. But thank you for that question. It's a good one.
So the follow-up data that we need is the number of landlords across the city and across the region that are taking housing choice vouchers, and then the number of units that we have currently in the inventory at 40% of the AMI and below. Those are the two.
You guys got that notes? All right. What the last piece she just said. Can you repeat that again? Because I don't want people. You got it? Okay. Thank you, Councilman.
And did you have anything, Ms. Trammell?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Stephen, I just want to say thank you for bringing this to us. And I did have a question. Suppose they do not want to come back.
Right. So
Because
what you
I've
see all right. So you see all across the country, and I've represented housing all across the country, and Richmond is no different. When it was Dove Court, right, before you got here, is that residents say, guess what? If you got a 10 phase, well, that's going to take 15, 20 years. I'm not waiting. Give me my tenant protection voucher, right, which is different from other vouchers. It's a different funding stream. Give me my tenant protection voucher. I'm not waiting 10, 15 years. I want to go to the hillside, have a better life for myself or my family, or I'll go to the county. They can do that. What we have found statistically, and Richmond's different, is that folks say, I don't want to come back to public house, and that's fine. But see, that's built in the residents' Bill of Rights, which will be, it's not in the guilt payment date. We're going to, at our committee meetings, we want to present it to the residents first and say, are you sure that's what you want? And then we'll take it back to the board. But that's what we see, that residents, you should give residents to have choice.
And I'm also hearing from, when you spoke at our public safety meeting, I got a couple calls that night. The citizens were really, really happy that you and the police chief have formed a relationship together and with the citizens. And that's something that, being on council for 25 years, I've not seen that in the past. So I just wanted to commend you and say thank you for working with our police chief, for bringing this to our public safety meet. And then you also said that you were going to do a follow-up in September.
Yes, ma'am. So you're right. And so thanks for inviting your public safety meeting. Chief Edwards and I, looking at the Big Six and our senior sites, we presented to you all, your committee, some enhanced measures to provide safe and security. And we're going to have some evictions that have nothing to do with non-payment of rent. As we know, we heard some people coming up and saying about the crime that's in our Big Six communities. We've seen that ATF come in. They've taken loads of guns and rifles away, and we've seen the violence. So we're going to do that. But I have to take one thing. Remember the plan that I presented that we're doing in concert with Chief Edwards? I believe, having grown in public housing, it's not about always just putting more police in there. What we're going to do intentionally is create more safe space for our young people. If you got, like when I was growing up in public, you got a safe space, you're more likely not to get in trouble. As Delicate McQuinn said, idle minds and idle time is the devil's workshop. And we need to create more safe space for our young people. And last, my VP for communications, Ms. Angela Fountain, we've got a program that's called "If You See Something, Say Something." We've heard that expression before, but we've seen some fights on video, and maybe some folks, when they're watching, they might say, you know what? I'm fearful of retaliation. I'm going to pick up a phone. So we have an anonymous tip line where if you see something, say something, and we're going to disperse and try to do something different. We know that at 7 a.m. in Fairfield, there's a line that comes up. Chief Edwards and I talk about it. They line up at 7 a.m. drug. But when they see Chief Police RPD coming and our coming, they get on radio and they disperse before we get there. So we're going to be doing some other things I can't talk about. But thanks for coming. Last, I want to say on the home ownership.
Hold on. We have some other questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Ms.
Just want to be sure. Thank you, Mr. Nisman, for the presentation. We've had you guys down here right often here lately. We've had you all to come before this body in different committees seems like to me 3 or 4 times in the last.
Yeah. My staff was just telling me that we come here more than we go to the board, and we're like we're living here. My gosh, we got to do the day-to-day operations. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But we're
agree.
grateful to be here.
I was counting up the number of staff people and adding up the number of hours from 3 o'clock and trying to figure out what the tremendous. And we want to do better with that. I'm saying that for a purpose. We want to make sure that we are working with you guys in a way that is beneficial both to the city and to you guys as to what you are doing. The Housing Authority is a major arm to the success of the city being able to redevelop affordable housing, and especially for the income level of residents that you can assist, that without the Housing Authority engagement, Richmond is most likely not able to reach to that level. So it is critically important that we work together and leverage the opportunities that exist to be able to provide housing at the income levels that otherwise we will not be able to do without the support and the partnership with the Housing Authority in making that happen. And I respect and appreciate the value of the nonprofit. And we want to work to make sure that we are expanding, that we are a partner in telling that story as it relates to leveraging the private contributions that we potentially can get, as well as other sources of funding, and using that arm. The request for transparency has been made extremely clear, and it goes beyond, it really goes to the fact that the level of success that the city has had in providing decent quality, safe housing for families in the city of Richmond has been tremendously under not successful in reaching a reasonable goal. And when families continue to feel like vouchers don't work, you give me a voucher, I have only so many days to get it, I can't find any place, I lose my voucher. At the end of the day, who they distrust is us. You, Housing Authority, City Council, City Administration. And so it is very important that our communication channels are enhanced in a way that folk understand that. And it's also important that we put forth additional efforts to get new legislation, even to the federal level, that makes it possible that the policies that we are operating within don't work for us. And, it's an easy excuse, it's perceived as an excuse, because if it's restricted by policy that ultimately I lose my voucher if I can't find a place in 90 days, and then I get one extension and it's no better, or there's not an inventory that we know of. So there's a lot of work that both the city can work with you and with your board to make those things happen. And we want to form that kind of, I would strongly encourage you to, I'm not sure that the administration is totally, I haven't had this discussion with administration, so I can't say that this is an obligation that we know how it will work out. But I think it's worth revisiting what you had initially created some time ago, this Economic Development Committee, where you had some of the key stakeholders there, you had the city there, and those kinds of things to kind of work through this. I think there was some restructuring that would make that work more effectively, and I'm not saying what that is, but that partnership opportunity for where the city needs to be accountable, because this is the auditorium that people come and make the comments that they make, and they expect City Council to be responsive to those and work those things out. And I think that we need to spend more time in that kind of work session to have. Appreciate your handout that you passed to us for your relocation, and I would encourage that we get this information to the full body Madam Chair. And to all of the committee members as well. We have it so that we can give you some feedback on that as well. There are some other issues that have come up that I'm not sure that we have fully resolved. I appreciate your response to some of those concerns that have just come up within the last few days. We would need to bring those things back to your table for further discussion. I'm not inviting you back here, so don't get that idea. But I am saying that there will be more discussion to address those concerns that have come up.
I appreciate that, and I can tell some of my staff who were asking for overtime, I told them they're not getting it to prepare to come here. I'm glad you said that. I do want to comment on the homeownership piece. We're hopeful that by the end of August, we'll be making a big announcement on Creighton Court. Hopefully, I'm not sure how many keys we're going to be handing out, but that's going to be all affordable. No market rate there. And that's going to be great. That's going to be fantastic. Second, in terms of our portfolio, again, with a lot of hard work, hopefully by the end of this year, and our Blackwell lots, we've got 35 that we've got with Maggie Walker Land Trust, and we have another 76 that's in our portfolio. All of that, I made the announcement that your community thing, that's going to be home ownership. I think it's in yours too, Ellen. I'm trying to look at the geography, but I think it's in both of your councilmatic district, Blackwell lots. That's all going to be home ownership. And we can control the income level on that. That's going to be big, and hopefully we can close on that by the end of the year. I don't know.
So, Madam Chair, I just want to say one thing as it relates to that. I know what it costs to do affordable housing. And I know what it costs to do home ownership. And I know the challenge with the affordability per unit when we're talking about home ownership in order to get the cost written down to the level that a family can only pay 35% of their income. That's a big lift. And so part of the challenge that we're having right now is that, you're probably more ambitious and more confident than there is a level of assurance that the money that is needed to make any of that happen is real. And so part of the challenge that you are dealing with right now, okay, is that your partners, including me, city council, okay, I'll just speak for Ellen. If I can't see that I see where those dollars and cents coming from, I don't need my residents calling me tomorrow saying they want to sign up for one of your new homes as a homeowner. And that is part of the reason why I'm suggesting to you that work group with your key stakeholders where we can see the dollars and cents are there. Because I can tell you, you may can't see it on the backside of my face, but my backside of my face is saying, you got to show me some dollars and cents on paper
It's called
to
show
help
me the
me
money.
get there.
Show me the
I'm
money.
not there.
Yep, that's where the RDC is so important, because we know how. I just watched the budget process.
But I appreciate that, Ms. Net. What I'm saying to you is that when we make public announcements and we haven't had the time to scrub that, it creates unknown challenges for us. Now, we trust you. We trust you. But we have to verify so that we can be confident that what we are saying is going to become a reality.
Yes, ma'am.
And we've had too many promises made in the city of Richmond. Same place you're talking about. Blackwell has been empty for
10 years, I think.
almost probably as long as I am alive here in Richmond, okay? And so people don't trust us because we do not put the evidence that what we are publicly saying is going to be a reality. And so I'm strongly encouraging you that those kind of work sessions, that when you say that, I can say, yeah, we've seen the numbers. We know where the money is coming from. And we know that we can do X number of units within X number of time. Because the people that have been looking at vacant land in Blackwell for 60 years don't believe just because we say so
Yeah.
that it's going to happen. And I just want to caution
Yes, ma'am.
us that building trust needs to be based on solid facts and not the absence of knowledge of that. And you may be the only person that really knows that, but we need to know that, especially when you come to this body and make those announcements of those kinds of things. We need to know that before so that we are confident that when those folks sitting out there in the audience that are doing this and doing this, I can assure them that what is being said is deliverable and they will experience not another 60 years of vacant land in their neighborhoods.
Yes, ma'am.
So just off my soapbox.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And thank you so much, Mr. Nesbitt. Two things. One, I do agree with my colleague, Ms. Robinson. We've been talking a lot about we need to continue unpacking this conversation. And we also need to unpack this RDC because we do know that there are, federal oversights that have to do with, redevelopment and then talking about transferring property into the RDC and raising money and all these different things. Our job as liaisons to the community is to help them understand what that is. And so, as Ms. Robinson stated, when you come and you make these grand statements, there are people that have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. So I would like for us, as we continue to work in partnership with you, because that is the goal, to get to a level of understanding where residents aren't feeling like they're being bamboozled. And I'm not saying that they are, but however, there's a lot of talk and a lot of jargon that's being said, and it's hard to kind of comprehend when you don't fully understand. And I can speak to that as someone who grew up in public housing. You have to be able to understand that. So I want us to just be real about when we have these conversations here and how we're talking about advancement. We also have to kind of keep it, on the ground level in a sense of where we are bringing folks along with us and so that they feel like they are a part of the process and not that the process has gotten ahead of them. So what we've kind of talked about in this committee is continuing to work with you, put together some sort of work session to really continue to unpack the things that you brought before us, helping folks understand what this Bill of Rights is, what the RDC is. It's not so much about putting a person on a board. We put people on boards every day. And so you can put a person on the board, but them being on a board, if they're not fully, if it doesn't fully benefit them, you know what I mean? Like we don't want to get into that either. So I just want to say thank you to, again, all of my colleagues who are all here to continue to support our housing crisis that we have in this city, to really talk about affordable housing and to work with you and your team. We won't bring you back next. You get off for August, but we will be back at you in September. So have a good August, and we will see you and talk to you before then. Please get that information sent to us, and we do look forward to working with you to just really do our due diligence. I've heard so much today about when it comes to RHA, there are issues that have been stemming over 40, 50 years. We want to get to a better place with that. And those conversations that you are having outside of council, as Ms. Robinson stated, when you come to council, we should also be able to speak to those. And a lot of those conversations we are not able to speak to. So that leaves us, in a place of not actually having the information as well. Yeah. So again, thank you. Thank you for your patience today. Thank you for being amenable to when we say, hey, we need you to come and present and being prepared. And we look forward to working with you come September.
And thank you. I just want to say that when you all are questioning me, all of you, sincerely, we do appreciate it because we've gotten better, right? Since we took that vote, we've been listening, learning, and trying to build coalitions. And since then, we've made changes around transparency on a lot of things with the RDC, with the resident on, and a number of things. So I thank you all for your piercing questions because that's how we get better. And watch this. I even believe the advocates have helped us out as well, right? I used to be an advocate, not way out there, but I used to be an advocate. So I actually respect what the advocates do because civil rights movement didn't happen alone. They said, get out there and make it happen. But I just want to make sure that when we do advocate, we do so in a respectful way and a truthful way. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. And thank you to your team for being here. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk. You have
One thing. I would like this committee to help me try to find out what is going on with Brady Square Apartments. Those things are beautiful. They've been sitting vacant for almost 2 years, and people are calling me every single day. And I mean, it is a disgrace. I've called code enforcement, the neighbors over there, others have called code enforcement to try to get the grass cut, all of that. And I haven't been by there today, but I know the past week ago it was not done. And it is horrible to see what is going on at the Brady Square Apartments. I think it's over 100 and maybe 50 units. This was done when the previous mayor and CEO was here, CAO.
Ms. Ebert is here, yes.
Good afternoon, Sharon Ebert, DCAO for Planning and Economic Development. Councilwoman Trammell, I'll have Merrick Malone contact you. As you know, the Brady Square project went into default because of the developer Dakota Partners was not able to move it forward. Since that time, it's been restructured. There's a new developer coming on board. They're going to pay all the subcontractors, and they're getting ready to restart. But I'll have Merrick contact you to give you a very detailed response and when that's going to happen.
All right, well, I'm glad I just brought that up here to this committee, and I thank you very, very much for letting me do this, because this is the first time hearing about it. It's in my district, and I'm sick and tired of not being told about different things that's going on in my district. And I would love to have had that update last week when I was getting yelled at, screamed at by the citizens. So if you could get him to please call me, I would really, really appreciate that.
We'll do so. I'm
All right.
very sorry that we haven't given you this information before today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Reba, Ms. Trammell. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Ebert. All right. Madam Clerk, this meeting is adjourned. Oh, got more business?
It was just a quick housekeeping question. Are you all
Yeah, got it. There will be no land use, housing, and transportation meeting for the month of August. So is that what you want to know? The community meeting on the 29th? Oh, the special meeting on the 29th, the work session. Yes, we are having a work session on the 29th. Okay. Wasn't for everybody. Meeting adjourned.